James Baker is here. He's one of this country's most distinguished diplomats and public servants. He has served under 3 U.S. presidents and has held some of the highest offices in American politics. They include Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, and White House Chief of Staff. He also led presidential campaigns for Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, and George H.W. Bush over the course of 5 consecutive elections. He was perhaps closest to President George Bush, 41. Their friendship stretches back to the 1960s when they started playing tennis together. The elder Bush has called Baker, quote, a man without whom I would not have become President of the United States, and a man to whom friendship means everything. I am pleased to have Jim Baker back at this table. Welcome.
Thank you, Charlie.
Let me look ahead to foreign policy. First, go to a place that you and I have talked about many times before, and you headed up an important committee, you and Lee Hamilton.
Yeah.
What will history say about Iraq?
I think it's too early to know. I think it's still baking.
One thing is not.
It could be.
Go ahead.
It could be. It could really say some very good things about it. If Iraq turns out to be an open and pluralistic society at peace with its neighbors, and that doesn't brutalize its own people, it's going to be. It'll say very good things.
And the fears that they had about Iraq don't look like they're about to happen, which is somehow it'll be subservient to Iran.
I don't think you're going to see it subservient to Iran. There is more
Shiite infinity.
There is more space there now, perhaps, for Iran. But you know what's happening this very day to day in Iraq is very encouraging. They're having an Arab League summit in Iraq, and they're proving to the Saudis and other Arab countries that come there, look, we're not a vassal state of Iran. And I think Iraqi nationalism will prevent that from happening. I think the biggest risk still is the Shia-Sunni divide. And that there might be some more ethnic tensions, and they're still blowing people up over there, kind of thing. They are. But I think history could prove to be history could turn out very well. But
there's also a thing about decisions like that in which you have to ask yourself, what is the opportunity loss? What might have happened if you hadn't done that in terms of the loss, first of all, of lives, and secondly, of treasure, and third, of options to do other things. Might Afghanistan be different?
Well, you could do all those hypotheticals, and
well, if you don't learn from history, where are you going to learn it from?
Yeah, you have to learn. Yeah. You will learn from history, but all I'm saying is the jury's still out, and it remains to be seen how that's going to ultimately turn out. And it could turn out well, could turn out very well. It also could turn out not so well.
Should we leave Afghanistan as the president has scheduled it?
In 2014. In 2014?
Yeah.
Yeah, we should.
Should we leave earlier than that?
I think what we ought to do is change the mission. I'm not sure I don't think we ought to bug out. We've lost too many lives there to just pick up and leave. I tell you what, I think
nobody's suggesting bugging out.
No, I think what we ought to do is leave on the schedule that the president has laid out. I support that, and change the mission from one of counterinsurgency to one of counterterrorism. Maybe you do counterinsurgency in the big cities and counterterrorism elsewhere in the country with the predators and so forth, the drones. Yeah. That's probably what I think. And, that was the argument that Vice President Biden made internally in the administration.
Afghan PAC review.
He lost that argument. But I think that was probably the right position, is the right position to be in today. But I think there's something else we ought to try. And this has been commented on a number of times by others, but everybody in the region has a stake in not having an Afghanistan that is a base for terrorism. India does, Pakistan does, Iran does, Russia does, China does. Why don't we have a conference of all of these nations, pull it together? We could lead or get co-leadership or something, and get them all together and say, look, it's in all of our interests that we not have an Afghanistan that just is a base for terrorism.
And would you do that right?
And we got 100,000 troops there, and you don't have any. Come on in here.
Would you do that now? Or would you wait until after the election?
Well, I don't see any major political downside to doing that. I mean, maybe there's one that I don't see.
Well, you're just full of time campaigning. In other words, should this become an important focus and say the stakes there are so serious that we ought to immediately have a conference and bring together an international conference, people with a stake in this.
I think he can run for office and
So you're recommending the president have a conference now.
And chew gum at the same time. He's got a Secretary of State who can lead the charge on this. I think it would be a very important thing to do.
So why don't you do something about it? You have a voice.
No, I've just told you. I've just said something.
But it's a good idea. And I mean, Henry Kissinger would be very supportive of that. I mean, in his columns, he's raised this notion.
He's already mentioned it.
Exactly.
In fact, maybe I stole the idea from Henry.
Well, you both could make that point, that we really need to get involved here and see people who have a vital interest get involved right away. But you have the problem that they tried to have a resolution about Syria in the United Nations, and Russia and China were not prepared to go. But now they are.
This is something that they can all agree on. Now, look.
You think so? In other words, they'd all come. China would come. Russia would come. Iran would come.
Well, I don't know that they would.
Turkey would come.
Don't know they would, but they have a national interest in coming. He might get attacked by the Republicans for saying, well, we'd be sitting down with Iran. You don't want to sit down with Iran. Well, guess what? Iran helped us. When George W. Bush, 43, went into Afghanistan the first time, Iran helped us. We asked them. They came.
Well, they had a problem with the Taliban.
Of course.
A big problem with the Taliban. They lost 40,000 people.
And they're going to have another big problem with them if this thing unravels there. That's why the conference makes sense.
And guess what Jim Baker also believes? That you ought to be talking to the Iranians anyway.
I think you ought to talk to everybody.
Yeah. Well, but you specifically include Iran. Talk to Iran. Don't have this attitude, we got to have conditions before we talk.
Well,
sit at the table and talk.
Yeah, don't be afraid to talk. If you know what you're doing, you don't lose a damn thing by talking. I don't buy this argument that you're giving somebody something by talking to them, if you're tough.
What's going to happen there? You think the Israelis at some point are going to say sanctions have not changed their mind, so we're going to change their mind?
I have no idea what's going to happen, but let me tell you what my view is on that issue, talking now about Iran and the nuclear. My view on that is that our policy and the Israeli policy fundamentally are not very far apart. We both believe that it would be a disaster for Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. Not so much because of the threat that they would use it against the United States or Europe or Israel, but because it would mean rampant proliferation of nuclear weapons.
And always the possibility of theft.
In a very unstable part of the world, and theft. So my view is that the difference between us is essentially one of timing, and between us and the Israelis.
We all know that.
And one of who should do the job. My view is that the Israelis are not the best equipped to do the job. We are better equipped to do the job. We might be able to prevent Iran from weaponizing. The Israelis would probably only be able to delay their weaponizing. If you may know that the Israelis came to the 43 administration and asked for bunker-busting bombs, overflight rights, and in-flight refueling capabilities, and President Bush 43 said, no, that is not in the interest of the United States.
The Israelis came to the United States.
The Israelis came to the United States. President Bush 43 said no, quite rightly said no, that is not in the interest of the national interest of the United States for you to strike Iran now. And then the same appeal was made to the Obama administration with the same basic response. Now, they did get some bunker-busting bombs, but essentially the same response. It's not in the national interest of the United States for you, Israel, to now bomb Iran. It will strengthen the hardliners. Sanctions are finally beginning to show some sign of biting. There's time for us to get this done, and we are in a better position to do it and can get it done than are you. So please don't do it. And then Martin Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, goes out here just a week or so ago and says, if Israel does this, it's going to mean the loss of American lives in the region.
So does Jim Baker believe that you can through all of that, use of embargoes, use of covert kinds of things, use of computer viruses that you can somehow, you can bring the Iranians to stop.
I don't know whether you can or not, but what I'm saying is there is still time left to continue to ratchet those things up and try to do that. And if it doesn't work, you've always got the military option.
But here's the problem for the Israelis. They watch that happening. They watch the ratcheting up, and they've been part of the process. Some of those things they've been involved in, and they watched it, and they say, at some point, they're going to be invulnerable to what we need to do. And so
invulnerable to what they can do, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't think invulnerable.
No, of course, not us, but them. They would say, we don't go now.
Yeah, that's right.
Our ability to change.
That's right. Their national interest there is a little different than ours.
Exactly.
Their national outlook, and that may be true, but it's not going to become invulnerable to ours. And so what I guess I'm saying is, I think we still have time. That's what the administration is saying. That's what the Bush 43 administration said. That's what Martin Dempsey and others are saying.
We have time.
Yeah.
Let us try to make this work.
But that doesn't mean you're going to rely on sanctions forever. It means that you're going to that indeed the military option is indeed going to be the last resort.
But will be used if everything else fails.
Yes,
will be used if everything else fails.
Never take it off the table.
People say never take it off the table is one thing. It seems to me to say, look, you can count on us using this if you don't stop.
Well, I would
that's
expect,
a different intonation.
I would expect that's the conversation that President Obama is having with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Look, don't you guys do this. It really doesn't work now for you to do this now. And when the time comes, when it's necessary to keep this from happening, we're going to do it.
What did you learn from all your experience in dealing with the Israelis?
Well, that they respect strength, that they expect you to say what you think and mean what you say. I found that to be the case. You know,
if you show weakness or show some,
if you show weakness, they can smell it 1,000 miles away. You bet. But they respect strength, and my experience was that the Israelis understand that we are always going to be there for Israel. President Obama put it pretty well when he said we have Israel's back. That was a good way to put it. We'll be there for Israel whether we're a Democrat or Republican.
He said all the things that they wanted to hear, evidently. I mean, he said, look, we're not in favor of containment. No. We understand you have a different obligation to your own citizens than we do. We understand.
I think they understand that we will be there, okay? Right. And I just think the issue now is primarily just one of timing. And you know, somebody made an interesting comment to me. This is not Jim Baker saying this to you, but I've just come back from the region. And somebody said to me in the region, the Israelis say they have a window of opportunity here. And they say that's before Iran hardens all of these sites to the point that they would not be effective in trying to take them out. But he said, I think the window of opportunity closes on November the 3rd or whatever the day of your presidential election is. And that this person thought they were trying to put pressure on the president politically. Now, that was an interesting comment. But
meaning that the president would have a different attitude if he wins re-election is what that means.
No, what it means is that the Israelis are pushing harder now because they are at the time of utmost leverage, maximum leverage.
Because the president needs all the constituencies that
we're in the middle of our
support
presidential election.
But it means that he might have a different attitude after the election if he wins. Who's going to win the election? How do you size it up, Noah, as someone who's been involved in presidential campaigns?
Okay. I don't buy the conventional wisdom that because we're having a knockdown, drag-out primary, it's very bad for my party, the Republican Party. I don't buy that at all.
I don't either.
I've always been of the view that Mitt Romney is the strongest candidate we could nominate. I believe that because you win general elections by appealing to independent voters in the swing states, and I think he's best equipped to do that. I say that I don't believe in the conventional wisdom that the primary is going to kill it, the fighting is going to kill us, because I think it strengthens our candidacy.
So what else do you think about this general election that's coming up?
Well, I think we have an excellent chance. The economy is not coming back particularly. The economy always determines. In the absence of actual war and peace, there's no other real. People vote their pocketbooks. It's the economy, and the economy. That's it, in that order.
Is health care a huge negative for the president?
I don't know the answer to that. It's a huge negative among many voters who hate to see the continued expansion of the federal government.
Yeah. Even though they love their Medicare.
They love it.
Love their Medicare.
They love it. But it's taken, well, that's fine, but Obamacare is more than Medicare. It's taken over more and more aspects of our national life. And people don't really like that. At least they don't on my side of the aisle.
Why can't, and do you have a sense that it will change, Mitt Romney connect with people more than he can?
Well, they used to say that about George H.W. Bush,
yes,
and guess what? He was elected president.
Yeah.
And they used to say it, they've said it about other candidates. I mean.
And does it all depend on, will this election, many say the following two things. One, they say that if it's a referendum on the president, his road is tougher than if it's a referendum on the future.
I agree with that.
Okay. It's tougher road for him.
Yeah, I agree.
I should talk about Syria.
Well,
what do we do next?
Well, I don't know. That's a very, very interesting question right now, and it's being debated, as you well know, right, on this very day. I think whatever we do, they're not talking about provisioning non-lethal aid to the opposition, but I think we ought to think about several things. Number one,
This is the recommendation of, even the Chinese may be involved. Maybe.
They might. But my view is we ought to have a broad-based multilateral coalition to do it. Don't do it unilaterally or with just one or two. We ought to know a little more about who we're going to give it to. Right. We don't know these people. Look, you know, I got to tell you, I'm not a big fan of what we did in Libya, even though I'm glad to see Gaddafi gone. What do we got there? The people we helped are now fighting each other. We have a civil war. We don't know who these people are, the Free Syrian Army and these other people. We don't really know who they are. And Syria is a hell of a lot different case than Libya. Syria is at the crossroads there of Turkey, Iran, Israel.
And I'll tell you what, we don't know what kind of anti-aircraft weapons that they have been supplied by the Russians either.
No, we don't. Well, the Russians do. I mean, we could probably find that out. But I think we just need to proceed very cautiously. We're broke. We don't need another major engagement. We really don't need that that we can't fund right now and can't pay for. They're not talking about military aid, and I think that's good. But provisioning non-lethal assistance, humanitarian assistance, is something that might. But we ought not to do it alone, and we ought to think too. Assad has lost legitimacy. You can't murder your own people and expect to survive for very long. And when he goes, and in my view, ultimately he will go. That's not all bad for us from the standpoint of the situation with Iran. Yeah. Because Iran had, Syria and Iran are very close, and the whole Hezbollah-Hamas thing.
Right. The Baker Institute at Rice University, what does it do?
Well, we are a policy institute that does not grant, we're not a school, we don't grant a degree, but we fund fellowships. We bring people in from the world of action, people who've been out in government and so forth. We give them 2-year fellowships. They work on various research issues or projects. They interface with the faculty there at Rice. The idea, I stole it from the Woodrow Wilson Center for Scholars and the Smithsonian, which is to bridge the gap between the world of ideas and the world of action. Yeah. So you bring people in from the world of action. They relate with the world of ideas. People who sit in their ivory towers. They can they have a lot of time to think up good theories. The guy out in the world of action is dealing with his inbox the whole time. So that's the theory of it. We're strictly bipartisan. We never conduct seminars, conferences, or anything that don't give both sides or all sides of a problem. And we've been very fortunate. We've had everybody's come down there to speak, all the former American presidents and people like Nelson Mandela and Gorbachev and Putin. And so we will get you down there one of these days.
I know, I promised already. You've had a remarkable life. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
Jim Baker from Houston.